When you think of someone who's depressed, you probably imagine a person who's sad, drained, and hopeless. But did you know that hidden within the fog of depression is something surprising, almost paradoxical? See, if you've ever spoken at length with someone who's depressed or been deep in the throes of it yourself, you might notice a sharp, almost ruthless kind of logic. Some people who struggle with depression notice that they become more realistic, more analytical, and in some ways even more rational than those who aren't depressed. It may sound counterintuitive. How can a condition defined by emotional pain sharpen logic? But psychology and neuroscience suggest that depressed minds often process reality with a level of sober clarity that can be startling. So let's dive deeper and explore how depression can work as a filter for reality. One of the most well-known ideas in psychology is the depressive realism hypothesis. First proposed in 1988, this theory suggests that people with mild to moderate depression sometimes perceive reality more accurately than those without it. To test this, they conducted an experiment where participants were asked to judge how much control they had over a light bulb turning on. Non-depressed participants tended to overestimate their influence, believing their button presses were causing the light to turn on, when in reality, it was completely random. Depressed participants, however, were much more accurate. They didn't assume control where there was none. While further evidence has been mixed and inconclusive, there's certainly an argument to be made that, while most people lean toward optimism or self-serving biases, depression seems to strip away those comforting illusions. The logic of loss. Depression is often triggered by experiences of loss, of relationships, opportunities, health, or even meaning. When your world shifts in painful ways, the brain tries to make sense of it, and logic becomes a survival tool. Think about grief. It forces us to confront what really matters, but it also disrupts our cognition. Studies show it can impair focus, memory, and decision-making. And it's common to bargain or carry irrational guilt. Yet, paradoxically, this same process can sharpen logic. Stripped of optimism and distraction, the mind narrows life down to its bare essentials. What remains is a narrowed, sober clarity, not flexible or hopeful, but piercingly realistic. For example, psychologists studying analytical rumination suggest that depression may have evolved to help us focus on complex problems. When the brain can't lean on hope or distraction, it shifts into problem-solving mode, forcing us to analyze causes and consequences in exhausting detail. That's why many people report that during depression, they suddenly notice things they hadn't before or begin to question long-held assumptions. The neurology of emotion versus reason. On a neurological level, depression changes the way the brain processes information. The brain's reward system, centered on dopamine pathways, often becomes less responsive. Things that once brought joy now feel flat. Without the pull of reward, the brain isn't as easily swayed by rose-colored thinking. Some studies also suggest that depressed people show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning, reasoning, and evaluating consequences. The result is a colder, less emotionally biased approach to decision-making. Of course, this doesn't always feel like a gift. The same analytic style that spots logical inconsistencies also sees life's unfairness with brutal clarity. But it does explain why many people experiencing depression find themselves drawn to philosophy, problem-solving, or brutally honest self-reflection. Philosophy, stoicism, and the depressed mind. History is full of philosophies that closely resemble the thoughts of someone experiencing depression. Stoic philosophers, for example, taught people to detach from their emotions, confront hard truths, and prepare for the worst. Existentialists like Kierkegaard and Sartre wrote about despair as an unavoidable condition of human existence. For someone who's depressed, these ideas often feel less like abstract theories and more like lived experience, giving words to what they already feel. When optimism has been stripped away and joy is no longer guaranteed, philosophies grounded in logic, acceptance, and meaning-making, rather than blind hope, can feel more honest than simple positive thinking. For many, it's comforting to hear the Stoic reminder that pain is part of life, or the existentialist claim that meaning must be created, not discovered. These ideas show that depressive clarity isn't just an illness. It's part of a long human tradition of seeking wisdom through hard truths. The cost of too much logic. Of course, it's not all hidden strength. The logic of depression can easily turn into paralysis. When you see every possible downside, risks can feel impossible to take. If you know relationships can end, jobs can collapse, and futures can derail, it's hard to find a reason to try. This is the double-edged sword of depressive clarity. It's rational, but not always helpful. To function well, we need both realism and optimism. Without hope, logic grows heavy, stripping life of motivation. That's why therapists rarely tell people to simply think positive. Instead, they encourage holding both truths. Yes, life is fragile and unfair. And yes, despite that, meaning and joy are still worth reaching for. So, are depressed people more logical? In some ways, yes. Depression strips away comforting illusions, counters positivity biases, and pushes the brain toward deep analysis. But logic without hope is incomplete. The challenge and the path to healing lies in integrating both, holding on to the clarity depression provides while gradually reintroducing warmth, optimism, and the possibility of joy. In that sense, depressed logic isn't something to cure, but something to rebalance. If depression has ever made you feel like a cold observer of your own life, remember this: your logic is a survival instinct. It's your brain's way of saying, if I can understand it, I can survive it. Respecting that doesn't mean glorifying suffering. It means honoring that clarity while still making space for hope. So, did this video resonate with you emotionally? How have you seen logic and hope coexist in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more meaningful conversations. Thanks for watching.